Thank you for joining me today for this watercolor demo. This is the sunflower we're going to try to do. We will start from scratch and show you some painting brushes that I use for most of my watercolor work. These are really great brushes. They hold a lot of water. This one here I do background work with, down to fine detail, actually. It's a great brush. I like to start big, and then the one next to it, just like it, I do for smaller forms and shapes. The little line brush there I use, the flat brush I use for line and some corner work. But you got to have a good watercolor brush. This one here is one of my favorites. That I paint trees with it. It allows me to remain loose. It'll go down to a fine point for script work, or stay loose like it's just very soft and can do wonderful strokes of different shapes. So I love that brush. And then the smallest one there is a detail brush that I like. It's called a rigger, and it goes down to a fine line, or I can do corners and shapes, and you'll see me use probably all of these brushes except the flat brush. Here I'm using 140 hard press paper. You got to have good watercolor paper. I use Arches, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to. You have to find the paper you like the most. Arches is very predictable, very strong. And as I draw my shapes, I'm making my shapes different shapes and sizes. That's important. Randomness is very important. You don't want things to all look the same, cut out the same. I'm adding water here in the areas of where I want my color to flow, and it's pretty wet. You can see it's very glossy. I'm using a lot of water because I want it to stay wet for a while, because I'm going to add a few colors into the yellow I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with the lemon yellow. I don't have a particular paint that I really love. I just love color, and so I'll saturate the color, or I'll use more water to make it less saturated. But some colors I'm fond of, and you'll see me use some here. But brands I'm not so crazy about. You know, I get what I can do on sale. I'm pretty cheap and try to save a buck here and there. So what I'm doing is laying in my orange and gold mixture and letting that flow. I don't go back into it. I want it to stay fresh. Let that color do what it's going to do. This one here is called Opera. It is one of my favorites. Let that flow, and that gave it some warmth here. I'm adding a blue as a complement in a way, but it turned green, which is okay. I think that'll work just fine. I would have preferred it to be blue, but that little area there I'm dabbing away so that it doesn't stay dark. I don't want it to not look like a petal of the flower. These are the leaves I'm putting in. I'm adding just a kind of a gray-green, not doing a whole lot, and then that's burgundy. I put a piece of burgundy in there because I like color. And there we go with some more yellow. I'm just going to let those colors flow. That's what's so magical about watercolor. Let the colors meld and do what they're going to do. I don't think you can accomplish that. Look how soft those are and how they meld together. There's no hard lines. If I went back in there, you would see where I had dabbled with it, and you don't want that. And here I'm just painting the seed pod, and I'm going to leave those little sparkles there. I like that, and probably could have left a few more, but I'll go back in with something later and add some more. But this is the dark brown that I'm doing to just build up my seed pod, and I'm going to, again, keep that leaf clean. That's all you got to do is just lift that color out of there. Just squeeze it out of there with a rag. Now I'm going to put my edges in, and notice that I didn't close the edges all the way around. That is just my artistic preference. I don't want to make it boring. I want it random. I want to have the eye skip around. You can see these wonderful warm colors of the leaf, and I'm going to add a little lime green to that leaf and just give it a little bit more color to pop. Less gray, that way it'll come forward a little bit in color. The bottom leaf, I'm not going to fully color in the lime green. I'm going to let that just fade into the purple. So you can see how color just kind of dances with water. It's just a fun medium to use. Now I've dried my painting, and I'm coming in with my small rigger, just doing what I told you, some detail work, developing shapes, adding water and color, so some leaves pop forward and some leaves stay behind. And I have to choose that every artist can get to choose which leaf stays behind and what comes forward just by where you add the paint. You can see I'm teasing the color in there by just adding water around the color and letting it flow. I don't want any hard edges, and if I do have hard edges when it dries and I somehow miss that, I can go back in with a brush and just soften that edge once it's dry. Won't hurt the paint underneath. And now I'm going to add a couple more leaves. I'm going to add one on the right-hand side here. I didn't draw it first, but I didn't need to do that. I knew I could just take my brush and put one in. And I'm leaving some white areas to put in some darker paint. Let that hold the darker paint so I have some transition of color. I'm actually going to do it darker too on the bottom edge there for shadow. Here's one on the left. And it's going to be a little longer. And composition too is just choices. I probably maybe could even put that leaf a little lower down so it's not so equal on both sides, but it's fine. The bottom leaf allows it to work, and I'm adding a little brown to that edge to give it some color change. That's what I love about watercolor. It's just so easy to make color changes without doing a whole lot. Let the water work for you. Now I'm going to put the little pods in there of the seeds that are found in sunflower. You want it to be random. You don't want too much, and I've got a lot there, so I'm going to soften that with some water. I don't want that to be so dominant and cartoonish, so I'm going to pop some water in there and let that flow around and loosen up that hard edge on those pieces. Now the background goes in, and I'm just going to wet my page. As you've seen me do the flower before, I'm going to put a lot of water down because I want it to stay wet so that when I put other colors in there, there's this flow that takes place. The bottom of the flower, I'm going to leave a little white sparkle going through there just to make that flower be the most part of the interest. Keep it a little bit... as you can see, the white is going to stay. It just allows it to have a little bit more contrast, and I go sometimes right up to the edge of the flower, and sometimes I leave a gap. I can go back in and do more later if I want to, once it's dry. But it's very important to remember: don't go back in unless it's dry. If you're going to add a different color or start moving more paint around or making different shapes. Watercolor, if you go back into a watercolor that's wet and your brush has more water in it than the water you're painting into, you will have a blossom, you'll have a mess. And so be careful how you control the water in your brush as you approach a watercolor. This is a white substance that I use I love it. It takes, it really covers very well. It's a water medium. Allows me to do a few sparkles and highlights here and there for interest. And I like to do that, but sometimes I can get carried away. So I'm talking to myself right now saying, okay, don't overdo it. Where else can I put it? And also think random and, don't do too much. And then I'm going to take my rigger and wet it, and I'm going to sprinkle the edges of my background to give some interest in my background, of some white spots and sparkle. If I get that on my watercolor flower, because it's so wet and my flower is dry, I can just take a little towel or paper towel and just lift that off, wipe it off. So that's what I'm doing. I'm adding a little darker color now and spritzing it. You can use a toothbrush to do that, a wet toothbrush, but that tends to put a lot more down than you might want. So I like this little rigger to do that. I just put the paint on and tap it and let it go where it's going to go. So that's my watercolor, and I'm going to go one step further. I think I'm going to take a black ink pen, which you see here, and I'm going to push this just a little further. You can see me putting edges down around, just drawing around the different shapes. I don't draw into the line. I draw outside sometimes and leave a light white gap. I'm just doing this to see how this would work. I might ruin a painting doing something like this, but I tend to learn a lot when I push a painting. And I think that this little addition of sparkle around the leaves by just using a little black ink actually is improving my painting. So I'm going to go for it here all the way around and show you that I'm leaving gaps. I'm deciding how that little shaky line is going to look. Again, it's intuitive. You just play with it. You can't make a mistake. It's your design, your color, your pen. Isn't it fun? You get to create, make all these wonderful decisions, and when you're done, you look at it and you say, not bad, not bad. I think that was a good choice. If it wasn't a good choice, then go to acrylic and fix it. But watercolor does sing. Look at that. It has some great color. Might not be your choice of color, but you go out there and grab some 140 Arches paper or a brand of 140. Look at those soft, smooth moves of color that you couldn't have got if you tried to do it yourself. It's a wonderful medium to play with, and I hope you get out there and get some good brushes, get some 140 paper, get some paint, and just play. Make it fun. Explore. Try this and try that. You might have your own methods and ways of doing something, scratching into it, whatever you might want to do, but that little soft edge here, there's a hard edge right there on the top there. I'm going to go back in and soften that. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with this little demo, and I hope you can give that a try at home. Have fun with it, but just look at those luscious colors you can get. You can't get that any other way. So enjoy watercolor. It's a blast. It's pretty clean. Don't have a lot of brushes to clean up with some kind of chemical. And have fun painting. Be happy, be safe, and thank you for joining me today.